Imagine a 6'6" man stepping onto a dimly lit stage in Copenhagen.
Right.
The crowd is packed, the air is thick, and everyone just goes dead silent. They're waiting for him to play.
Yeah, the anticipation is huge.
Exactly. But instead of raising his instrument to his mouth, he holds this massive, heavy tenor saxophone completely horizontal across his chest.
Wow.
And he looks dead into the crowd and just starts speaking the lyrics of a love song word for word. He's making sure everyone understands the story before he ever plays a single note.
It's such a striking image. I mean, it fundamentally changes how you perceive what's about to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not just a performance anymore, right? It's a confession.
It really is. And today, we're looking at why one of the fastest, most frenetic players in jazz history decided to, completely stop playing and start speaking.
Right.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the massive, complicated life of a true titan of the tenor saxophone.
It's going to be a fascinating one.
For sure. To do this, we're pulling from excerpts from the text Long Tall Dexter, The Life and Legacy of Dexter Gordon, along with some incredible audio archives from the Saxophone Knowledge and Mastery series.
And, this is a journey that really challenges how we consume music. Because we usually treat music as this invisible floating thing.
Right, like something entirely auditory.
Exactly. We tend to separate the art from the physical body making it.
But with Long Tall Dexter, the physical reality of who he was, the literal weight of his life, is completely inseparable from the sound pushing through that brass tube.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are diving into how this musical giant bridged the dizzying speed of the bebop revolution with this incredibly deep, soulful capacity for storytelling.
And how he eventually became the first jazz musician ever nominated for a Best Actor Academy Award.
Which is just wild to think about. As we go through this today, I want you to really consider how an artist's personal struggles, their physical limitations, and their triumphs, directly engineer the architecture of their art.
Because with Dexter Gordon, if you know how to listen, you can hear every single chapter of his life in his tone.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at where that tone was born. Because his foundation completely flips the script on the typical struggling artist in the gutter narrative.
It really does.
Dexter Keith Gordon was born on February 27, 1923, into a highly respected, deeply established Los Angeles family.
What's fascinating here is the lineage. It is crucial for understanding his baseline psychology.
Right.
I mean, his maternal grandfather actually earned the Medal of Honor in the Spanish-American War.
Wow.
Yeah, so that establishes a very serious standard of excellence in the household right from the jump.
And his father was a trailblazing African-American physician. But he wasn't just, a neighborhood doctor. His waiting room was basically a who's who of jazz royalty.
Yeah, the stories from that waiting room are incredible.
We are talking about guys like Duke Ellington and Lionel Hampton just sitting on his dad's furniture, flipping through magazines, waiting for a checkup.
Which is crazy to picture.
Right. I mean, growing up with Duke Ellington in your living room is like trying to learn physics with Albert Einstein casually dropping by for coffee.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
How does that uniquely privileged, high-status environment shape his approach? Especially to an instrument he actually picked up relatively late in his teens.
Well, the intimidation factor just vanishes. I mean, most young musicians start out with this paralyzing sense of awe.
Sure, they're terrified.
Exactly. They have this feeling that the greats are untouchable gods living on a different planet. But for Gordon, the greats were literally just his dad's patients.
He saw them as flesh and blood people who caught colds and needed medicine.
Right. So he skips that entire phase of self-doubt. He develops a deep, ingrained respect for the music, but he doesn't have the fear that holds so many young artists back.
Which makes sense. He just viewed himself as a peer to greatness.
Yeah, he just expected to be great. So even though he started on the clarinet at 13 and then shifted to the alto sax at 15.
And didn't even find his true voice on the tenor sax until he was 17, right?
Exactly. But because of that innate confidence, he sought out rigorous technical training from Lloyd Rees. And he went to Jefferson High School alongside future heavyweights like Chico Hamilton.
He was building an elite foundation very, very quickly.
Very quickly. And that immense ingrained confidence is what propelled him to just leave high school entirely.
Right. It's late 1940. He's still a teenager, and he dives headfirst into the grueling, highly competitive professional big band circuit.
By joining Lionel Hampton's outfit, which joining a premier big band as a teenager is an unbelievable trial by fire.
Here's where it gets really interesting. From there, the momentum is just wild. He does a stint in the Army Signal Corps playing in a military band.
Right.
Then he comes back, works with Louis Armstrong and then Fletcher Henderson. But the real crucible, the moment that changes the trajectory of his instrument, hits in 1944.
The Billy Eckstine Orchestra.
Yes. The sources describe this specific band as the very laboratory of bebop.
It absolutely was.
He is standing shoulder to shoulder with the absolute pioneers of the genre, guys like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
And this is where Gordon pulls off a monumental musical achievement. He takes Charlie Parker's lightning-fast, frantic alto saxophone ideas and translates them to the tenor saxophone.
Which is no small feat.
Wait, I'm trying to picture the mechanics of this. Parker's playing these blindingly fast runs on a tiny alto sax. Gordon is trying to do the exact same thing on a massive tenor.
Right.
Wouldn't he literally run out of breath halfway through a solo? Walk me through the physical physics of what he was doing.
It is incredibly taxing. To understand the scale of what he accomplished in that band, you really have to look at the machinery of the instruments.
Okay.
So the alto saxophone is smaller, the keys are physically closer together under your fingers.
Right, it's more compact.
Exactly. And the column of air required to make the reed vibrate is smaller, meaning the mechanisms are naturally lighter and much more responsive. Charlie Parker was weaponizing that lightness.
Playing at speeds that were previously thought impossible.
Yes, spinning these incredibly complex webs of notes.
Like a sports car,
A
basically.
sports car is a great analogy, nimble and quick. The tenor saxophone, on the other hand, is a semi-truck.
Because it's so much bigger.
It is significantly larger and heavier. The keys have more physical travel distance, meaning your fingers have to press down further and harder.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the finger travel.
Yeah, and it takes vastly more breath support from your diaphragm, more sheer physical force just to manipulate the sound.
So to force a larger, heavier brass tube to speak that rapid-fire, frantic musical language of bebop,
It requires absolute, supreme physical stamina.
translating Charlie Parker's frantic bebop to a big, heavy tenor saxophone sounds like trying to run an Olympic sprint while wearing heavy hiking boots.
That's exactly it. He was manhandling the instrument to make it do things it wasn't strictly designed to do.
And maintaining absolute clarity and a massive tone while doing it.
It's an athletic feat as much as a musical one.
Which perfectly sets up the physical toll of what happens next. He heads back to Los Angeles in 1947 and engages in these legendary marathon tenor battles with a player named Wardell Gray.
Oh, those battles. They defined the entire West Coast jazz scene at the time.
They were so iconic, they were actually immortalized in Jack Kerouac's classic novel On the Road.
Yeah, they were a huge cultural touchstone.
You've got these two titans just going at it on stage for hours. They're pushing each other to the absolute brink, trading solos, trying to outthink and outplay the other at these blistering bebop speeds.
Think about the lung capacity required for that. A marathon tenor battle is essentially a heavyweight boxing match, but you are furiously blowing air through a metal tube the entire time.
It sounds exhausting.
It was this high-wire artistry that demanded everything from the body.
But, you can't live on that high wire forever. The sheer velocity of the 1940s bebop scene eventually caught up with him.
It did.
The relentless lifestyle paved the way for a tragic and devastating fall as we move into the 1950s. The sources outline a very brutal decade for him.
Yeah, it was a very dark period.
Heroin addiction completely derailed his career. It led to severe legal trouble, and he spent significant time incarcerated in Chino and Folsom prisons.
The physical reality of a prison cell is, it's the ultimate contrast to the absolute freedom of the bebop stage.
Exactly. And musically, it meant the world kept turning without him.
Which is terrifying for an artist.
If you've ever had to step away from your profession or a deep passion for years, you know that terrifying feeling of being left behind. While Gordon was locked away, he essentially missed out on much of the hard bop era.
An era he had basically laid the groundwork for.
Right. Now, for you listening who might not be deep into jazz theory, hard bop was this evolution of bebop that brought in heavier blues and gospel influences. It was grittier.
Yeah, it had a heavier groove.
But by the time Gordon emerges clean at the end of the decade, the landscape has shifted again into what they call modal jazz. So what does this all mean? He misses an entire musical era that he essentially laid the groundwork for. When he finally gets to Blue Note, does he just pick up exactly where he left off, or did his time away fundamentally alter his musical DNA?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
when you are forcibly isolated from your art form, You're left with nothing but time to reflect on what you actually want to say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when he came back and signed with Blue Note Records in 1961, sparking this incredible renaissance with albums like Doing All Right, Dexter Calling, and Go, he didn't just pick up where he left off.
He changed his approach.
He synthesized his life experience.
How so? Because you mentioned modal jazz earlier, and to me, if bebop is a chaotic, high-speed conversation where everyone is interrupting each other,
Right, very dense.
then modal jazz, from my understanding, is like stepping out of that crowded room into an empty cathedral. You hit one note, and you just let it echo.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
It relies less on a rapid, dense chord changes and more on lingering, open scales.
That's a great visualization. Modal jazz gives the music a wider, more spacious landscape. It gives the notes room to breathe.
Okay, so how did Gordon adapt to that?
Well, he didn't just abandon his past. Gordon took his underlying bebop speed, that hardened ability to run the sprint in hiking boots, and he placed it inside these new, wide-open cathedral spaces.
So he wasn't frantic anymore.
No, he was incredibly patient. He combined the technical brilliance of his youth with the heavy, sobering, lived experience of his incarceration and recovery.
Wow.
The result was a much deeper, more mature sound. The sources describe it as massive.
Massive. I like that.
It wasn't just loud, It had the psychological weight of a man who had been at the absolute bottom and meticulously fought his way back up to the surface.
You can literally hear the survival in the horn.
Absolutely.
Yet, despite creating some of the absolute greatest American music of the era, despite successfully rebuilding his life from the ground up, the reality of America in the early 1960s ultimately forced him to seek refuge an ocean away.
Yeah, it was time for a major change.
In 1962, Gordon leaves for Europe, and he stays there for 14 years.
Primarily dividing his time between Paris and Copenhagen.
Now, I want to challenge a narrative here. We so often hear these glamorous, deeply romanticized stories about American artists moving to Paris to, find their muse or write poetry at a sidewalk cafe.
Right, the typical expatriate trope.
But looking at the historical facts laid out in our sources, this wasn't some gentle, creative retreat. It was a necessary survival tactic, wasn't it?
Impartially speaking, the source material is unequivocal about the historical context driving that departure. In 1962, the United States remained a deeply hostile, dangerous place for Black artists.
Yeah.
Systemic American racism wasn't an abstract concept. It was a daily, oppressive reality that dictated where you could eat, where you could stay, and how you were treated by the law.
It was everywhere.
Exactly. And the sources note that Europe offered Gordon a physical and psychological environment free from that specific American systemic racism.
That must have been a profound relief.
It was. Over there, audiences and society at large treated him with immense reverence.
They respected him purely as a master of his craft.
Yes. And the creative impact of that cannot be overstated. When you remove the immense daily psychological pressure of simply surviving a hostile society, your brain is finally freed up to innovate.
He wasn't fighting to be recognized as a human being anymore.
Right, he was free to just exist as an artist. And you see this profound evolution in his legendary stage presence during this time. Which brings us back to that image we started with.
Holding the saxophone horizontally.
Yes. He developed this captivating habit of looking at the audience and reciting the lyrics to a ballad before he played it.
Which is such a powerful choice.
He had fully transitioned from a frantic bebop pioneer trying to cram as many notes into a measure as possible into a profound musical storyteller.
Every note suddenly had to carry the weight of a word.
Exactly. He wanted the European audiences, who might not have known the American standards intimately, to fully grasp the emotional narrative of the song.
He wanted them to feel the story.
And during this 14-year European period, his output was staggering. He recorded prolifically for Steeplechase and Prestige Records.
He was incredibly busy over there.
Very busy. And he frequently collaborated with fellow expatriates, like the brilliant pianist Kenny Drew, who had also sought that same peace and artistic respect across the Atlantic.
So he built this beautiful, creatively fulfilling life in Europe. He was safe. But there is a stubborn reality about being an American jazz legend.
Oh, yeah.
The ultimate vindication of your legacy often requires conquering the very country you fled. He had absolute peace in Copenhagen, but you can't be a titan without testing your armor in the Mecca of jazz.
You had to go back to New York.
Exactly. Which brings us to his 1976 homecoming in New York.
It was a truly triumphant return. He steps onto the stage at the legendary Village Vanguard.
And the sources say the crowds treated him like a conquering hero.
They did.
It's wild contextually because if you look at the mid-1970s, the previous decade in America had been completely dominated by electric fusion.
Right, Miles Davis, Weather Report.
You had synthesizers, electric bass, huge walls of amplification. But Gordon walks into the vanguard with nothing but his acoustic tenor sax.
Just him and the horn.
And the sheer power of his presence actually helps reignite public interest in acoustic jazz.
He reminded an entire generation of listeners about the raw, unamplified power of an acoustic instrument in the hands of an absolute master.
He proved you didn't need a synthesizer to sound massive.
Not at all.
That momentum leads to a contract with Columbia Records, and he enjoys this highly celebrated, incredibly stable final act to his musical career.
But then it takes an unexpected turn.
Right. In 1986, we get a poetic twist of fate that almost sounds like fiction. The French director, Bertrand Tavernier, is making a film called Round Midnight.
Yeah.
And he decides to cast Dexter Gordon as the lead, playing a fictional expatriate jazz musician named Dale Turner.
The parallels between the character and Gordon's actual life are undeniable. The sources explicitly note that Gordon was, in many ways, playing a thinly veiled version of himself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because he doesn't just show up and read lines.
No, not at all.
His deeply soulful performance makes him the very first jazz musician ever to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor.
It's an incredible milestone.
But wait a minute. How does a lifetime of playing the saxophone translate to Oscar-nominated acting? We're talking about going up against trained, veteran Hollywood actors.
This raises an important question, right? It really reframes what acting actually is at its core.
How so?
Well, if great acting's about conveying profound, authentic human truth, Gordon had a lifetime of material to draw from.
He had lived it all.
Exactly. He didn't have to act the weariness or the flashes of brilliance or the deep, lingering pain of the character Dale Turner. He simply channeled his entire massive, complicated life into that performance.
He poured the addiction, the prison time, the European exile, and the triumph directly into the camera lens.
All of it. When you watch Round Midnight, his face, his heavy posture, his slow, deliberate cadence, it was all an extension of his jazz artistry.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Just like he would hold his horn flat and recite the lyrics of a ballad to convey the story to a crowd in Paris, he used his physical presence on camera to convey the story of a life lived entirely and sometimes destructively for jazz.
So the camera captured the exact same weight and soul that normally came through a saxophone.
Precisely. It wasn't a musician pretending to be an actor. It was a master storyteller utilizing a new medium.
It is an incredible final chapter. He lived a few more years after that monumental Hollywood recognition, eventually passing away from kidney failure and laryngeal cancer in Philadelphia on April 25th, 1990.
Yeah.
And he left behind a legacy that is almost difficult to wrap your head around.
Because it is a legacy etched not just into the vinyl of his records, but into the broader cultural history of the 20th century.
When you step back and look at the epic arc of Long Tall Dexter, it is staggering. He goes from the privileged elite waiting rooms of his childhood in Los Angeles, where the jazz gods were just regular people, straight into the dizzying, high-stakes laboratory of the bebop revolution.
Forcing a heavy instrument to do impossible things.
Yes. Then he survives the incredibly dark valleys of addiction and the harsh reality of the prison system, only to emerge with a deeper, more patient sound.
And then the European chapter.
Right. He escapes across the ocean into a 14-year European exile where he finds the psychological freedom to perfect his art, only to return for a final, Oscar-nominated triumphant homecoming. It is a life that absolutely demands to be listened to.
And the beautiful thing is, every single phase of that life, every joy and every hardship, is permanently captured in the air moving through his horn.
Which brings us to the end of today's deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to mull over on your own.
Oh, I love these.
We talked earlier about how Dexter Gordon's marathon saxophone battles in Los Angeles physically exhausted him, but also how they directly inspired Jack Kerouac's writing of the iconic novel On the Road.
Right, the rhythm of the prose.
Exactly. It proves that the rhythmic, frenetic language of jazz was powerful enough to literally shape the defining literature of the beat generation. So, as you go about your day-to-day, I want you to ask yourself, if a saxophone solo in 1947 can alter the course of American literature, what other hidden ways has the invisible architecture of jazz secretly structured the novels, the poetry, or even the movies you consume today?
The connections are everywhere, if you know how to listen for them.
They really are. Keep listening closely. We'll catch you next time.